Okay, is titled IBM Replication Updates 4 Plus in 45, and will be presented by Ed Lynch and Frank Fillmore. I would like to introduce our presenters quickly, and then we're going to get started. Ed Lynch is a former IBM technical advisor whose name I'm sure many of you recognize. He's been working on an IIDR installation to synchronize data from DB2 for ZOS to MemSQL at a large financial institution. And I hope I said that right, Ed. Ed has traveled extensively to support complex replication implementations, including a Kafka implementation this past summer in the Middle East. Ed's going to be presenting at Think next week, session 1583A, which we'll be discussing a little bit later. Frank Fillmore, is the founder and president of the Fillmore Group, where he manages both the technical consulting practice and he also works as a consultant. Like Ed, Frank has been working with IBM's replication solutions for more than a decade and has been supporting IBM's efforts to promote IBM solutions. Frank is an IBM Gold Consultant and IBM Champion for both Analytics and Z Systems. Frank has delivered IBM's authorized training classes for Q Replication, ICDC, and PureScale. And one of the Fillmore Group's core values and things that we promote is education for any solution you're trying to implement. With that, let's get started.
Thank you very much, Kim. I really appreciate it. And welcome to you, Ed. We have a lot of ground to cover here in the next 45 or so minutes. We have a lot of people who have joined the webinar today, and this webinar is being recorded. It is going to be placed on YouTube and along with the materials on the Fillmore Group's blog in the next 24 hours or so. The handouts for the presentation that you are about to see is in the handouts pop-out on the GoToWebinar instrumentation panel that it should be on the right of your screen. And if you have any questions, everyone on the webinar today, other than Kim and Ed, are on mute. So we wanted to avoid the background noise. However, if you have any questions, anything that you want to understand better, anything that we can help you with, please reach out via the chat so that we can field your questions and tailor this presentation to what you're looking for. So we're going to start off asking you questions, and that is our first poll of the day. So is your organization currently using replication in a production environment? So I'm going to open the polls. And you should see this poll on your screen right now. We'll see if people have an opportunity to update us. And we'll give you a few seconds to collect responses. And most of you chimed in, and the answer is pretty overwhelmingly that the answer is yes. You are current replication users. No one, a few people are new to replication, but we suspected that you would not have had interest in this topic or signed up for the webinar if you knew nothing about replication. This is certainly not an intro. So I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. I think we have gotten most of the responses that we're going to get. And it looks like just about 90% of the people said, yes, you're currently using a replication tool in a production environment. So our agenda today is the what, why, and how of replication in under 10 minutes. So we're going to do that really quickly because we're preaching to the choir of a lot of replication users. What we're really going to focus on is the replication key new capabilities that are available from IBM's IIDR, IBM InfoSphere Data Replication Product Suite. And we want to make sure that you're aware of these new features. IBM has been investing heavily in this product, and we're going to talk about the DB2 for ZOS remote capture. We'll talk about big data, Kafka and Hadoop as a target for replication from a variety of different platforms, targeting the DB2 warehouse product. Sourcing from Postgres. Postgres, one of the fastest growing databases in the climate today. And then finally, replication for continuous availability. And then we're going to look beyond what's available today or just about to become available and look at 2019 and beyond in the direction that IBM is taking with the product set. So with that setting the table, we'd like to know which replication products you are currently using in your environments. And again, This is to try to tailor the presentation for your specific needs. So I'm going to go ahead and open another poll.
Yeah. And Frank, if I might add,
Sure.
if you're not using it today, in which environments do you potentially plan on using it?
Well, I don't have that up as a poll question. I mean, we could try to get some feedback when we're at the end, but right now we're just asking what they're using today.
Or plan on using in terms of the product set.
Okay. So it looks like Q replication is the big winner so far. That's kind of surprising to me. I thought we would have seen more ICDC, but it's about a 2-to-1. We have a few people using Attunity and a few people using Oracle Golden Gate. Okay, it looks like we've gotten all the people who are going to respond. So we're looking at just about 60% for Q replication, just about 40% for CDC, and a number of people, because multiple answers were possible in this. You could be using more than one of the products. 23% are using the classic products that replicate IMS, VCM, and DB2 for ZOS data from the mainframe. And we have a few folks using Attunity and Oracle Golden Gate. So thank you. Okay, so the again, very briefly, the what, why, and how in under 10 minutes. Data replication, as reported from data integration and integrity use cases, about 47% of the shops surveyed are using these today. By the way, I didn't say to everybody, mute your phones.
That was me.
I know it was you. You're the only other person on Vox right now. That's wonderful.
I just put it on silence.
That's perfectly fine. Lighten the mood. So, and that's going to increase to 50% by 2020. So lots of people are in the replication game, again, as most of you on this call know. So why do we do it? We need the data provisioned in the format it needs to be in the place it needs to be for a variety of different purposes. We started in this business, I started over 40 years ago, with primarily transactional data of taking orders and posting POs and things like that. And now we need to take that information, we need to reprovision in other places. And there are different ways to do that. There are ETL processes, etc. But we're focused primarily here today of making a copy of the data, taking it from the place where it resides right now, and then getting it where it needs to be in the format that it needs to be in. So some of these are event-driven. Something happened on one system, something needs to occur on a different system. We need to synchronize the data for a variety of different purposes, for DR, for high availability. And then finally, we need to have zero downtime server migrations. We need to do a version-to-version migration or a migration from one vendor's database to another without taking an outage. And we've actually done both of those things for large financial institutions. Okay, the core values, the things that drive the bus are, first of all, low impact. Most of the replication that we're going to talk about is log-based replication. We don't want to have to read the database. We want to have to take the data out of the database. We want to take it from the recovery logs that are generated by various database repositories, be able to take that and move that someplace else. We need it near real time for synchronization purposes. We can't have a transaction occur on one server and query another server and not see that that transaction appeared, because it would lead to people believing that there was inconsistent data or something didn't get copied. So real time or near real time, trusted delivery. We have to make sure that the data that appears on one system makes its way to the other system without fail. And the other really important thing, I think, for most of the customers that I saw registered for this presentation is enterprise scale. I mean, we're talking about the movement of terabytes of data on a regular basis throughout a business day for a variety of different purposes, and we're only getting more data all the time. Kim, you look like you had something. Okay, you're giving me that. I just have a comment look.
No.
Which I've seen before. So this, at a very high level, is what IBM's data replication portfolio looks like. So we can see here in the diagram, we have a source application doing something. This could be a web application. This could be CI/CS COBOL. And we are updating a series of data repositories. As I mentioned before, it could be something like DB2 for ZOS, or it could be Oracle, or it could be Postgres now. We have a capture component that reads that log. We have a transport mechanism for getting it from one place to the other. Now, there are different ways to implement this. The change data capture product uses vanilla TCP/IP to move the data. The Q replication product, which a lot of you are using, uses IBM's WebSphere MQ as the transport mechanism. And beyond the scope of this discussion about which is best in which use case, but suffice to say that they both work. We have an apply facility at the other end that takes whatever is coming down the pipe and puts it where it needs to be in the format that it needs to be there. And as you can see, it could be an ETL process like DataStage. It could be another queuing mechanism like Kafka, could be Hadoop, Hortonworks, it could be a message queue, it could be a database, any of the above. So let's find out from you all what the purposes of replication are in your organization. And there are only 5 polls. I know that they've been front-loaded, but again, we're trying to make sure that we're going to focus on what's most important to your organizations. So the choices here are high availability, disaster recovery, to populate a data warehouse or a data lake, operational reporting, or something else. And folks are weighing in. And just as I would have suspected, just all over the map, there is not one of these items that is not used by a significant percentage of our audience today. So we're looking at somewhere in the order of 54% for high availability, 29% for disaster recovery, 51%, 52% for data warehouse, data lake, operational reporting, and then 21% for other. So thank you. So let's look at some of the use cases. So in the upper left quadrant of this screen, we're looking at some of the classic products that contribute to either high availability or disaster recovery active-active type scenarios where we're using DB2 for ZOS or IMS or vSAM repositories on the mainframe and getting that data to those same repositories someplace else. So it could be a high availability system within the same data center, or it could be a data center 500 miles away. Starting in December 2018, which has already passed, IBM has delivered today the IBM Integrated Analytics System, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later, the replacement for what used to be called the Pure Data System for Analytics, the PDA, the Netezza formatted data appliance. IIAS is now available today, and the strategic objective is for DB2 Warehouse to replicate to itself and also between the IIAS and DB2 Warehouse. So for the purposes of always on information, active, always available, those are the things that are happening now. And then the business in real time of taking this data and moving it, we're looking at sort of the right-hand quadrant now of the screen, or the right half, of taking data from a variety of different sources. On the left-hand side, we're looking mostly at homogeneous data sources, like to like. Now we're looking at heterogeneous sources and targets of taking maybe a repository that is a transactional system and moving that down to a data lake or a data warehouse or Kafka or Hadoop, to a JDBC target, to the cloud, Azure, AWS, IBM Cloud. And some more information, and I'm not going to go into this in detail, but what we're focused on is the use cases for the different product. Pretty much the like-to-like replication are supported by the QRep flavor of IBM replication that I mentioned before. The heterogeneous, more or less supported by the CDC, the change data capture. And just a little bit of history, IBM developed the Q replication from an earlier product that is now known as SQL Rep. It basically replaced staging tables with MQ queues to be able to move the data between source and target. And then IBM acquired Data Mirror, which has their transformation server that allowed the heterogeneous type replication. And IBM, for a variety of reasons, basically bundled all those solutions into one product so that you could decide at deployment time which was the best product for your particular use case. So that's why we saw a lot of people using more than one of these products, because different products with different strengths and weaknesses. And again, not the purpose here to do a deep dive into the pluses and minuses of either solution. But the last question we're going to ask right now, and then we're going to go into the new feature functionality that we promised, is are you currently using IBM Z systems such as DB2 for ZOS, vSAM, and IMS? So thank you all for participating in that poll. And it looks like about 80% of the people on this call are using IBM Z systems as a data source. We have a lot of good news for you in that regard. So now let's talk about the new capabilities that we promised. So the first is replication from DB2 for ZOS using a new remote capture source engine, and that is available today. It GA'd in fourth quarter 2018. So let's talk about what that means. So if we look at one of the earlier slides, I'm going to flip back for a second. Here, we talk about the database logs and the archive and the capture function that we have here. The capture function is typically co-located with the database log that it is reading data from. That's not always the case, but typically it is. So the remote capture feature for DB2 for ZOS explicitly moves that capture function to another platform. So there are a couple of benefits for this, and I can best give you an example from a customer that we're working with today who is already testing or getting ready to test the remote capture function. They have a long-running process that they run once a year. It is a legacy process that runs on DB2 for ZOS that updates billions of customer records. And the problem that they had was the way that this application was designed before they were using replication was that there was a single logical unit of work. They didn't take intermediate commits. And that's probably due to the fact when this application was first written, it wasn't updating DB2 for ZOS, it was updating vSAM. So fast forward to today, they have had a multitude of problems trying to run this process on an annual basis without running out of memory on the source. Why do we run out of memory? Well, the way that replication works is I gather the changes from the log and I place them in memory until the capture component sees a commit. We don't get a commit, it doesn't send anything down the pipe. And that's just the way that these products are typically designed. The problem is I may have billions of transactions that queue up in the memory that aren't committed, and I run out of memory. So what the remote capture has done is allowed us to move that onto another platform, non-Z, either Linux or Linux running in a system ZLPAR, and allow you to move that all that processing load and have all the memory exploitation that is available. So let's look at what it looks. Let's see what it looks like from a diagram standpoint. So on the left-hand side, we have ZOS that we all know and love, DB2 for ZOS, either 11 or 12. We have the active or archive logs that have been running all this time. The new component, instead of capture running co-located on the system Z, we have a stored procedure which is being executed by a process that runs on the, it says Linux, Unix, Windows platform. I don't know that anybody would execute this on Windows, but apparently you can. But more likely you're going to be on Linux, and you're going to execute the stored procedure, which is going to scrape the log, return the log records back to the LUW process, and then be able to capture that data and send it down the pipe to whatever your target is. So this could be another DB2 for ZOS. This could be Hadoop or Kafka or Oracle or whatever it is that you need. So I'm going to pause right here. Ed, do you have anything that you want to talk about? Any use cases that you can see for this? The ways in which this might benefit customers, given your long experience with replication from Z?
Sure. It's been interesting because over the years I've had many customers asking, it's like, can I use specialty engines? How can I reduce the CPU that's being used by the capture component? How can I reduce the overall general cost of the environment itself? And so this is really one way of addressing that by enabling the primary consumer of the processing, primary consumer of memory for the capture process itself, shifting it to another engine. This other engine could be Z Linux. It could be Linux on any other platform that you like as well too, or as was indicated, the other flavors of Unix and Windows. So really all that the store procedure is doing, and it's running in an APF controlled environment, so your security is definitely part of it. It's really just passing and buffering the information back to the capture engine itself running on the LUW platform. So one of the beauties here is that the lab has shared with us some information that they're basically seeing a reduction of about 90, and I even heard someone mention up to 95% of the CPU versus running on the ZOS platform itself. So now that's not saying that CPU goes away. Rather, 90% of what ran on ZOS now can be shifted and running on another operating system platform itself, bringing that ZOS cost down, which affects anyone that's aware of what the pricing structure is on the Z platform. It tends to affect all the software that runs on that platform itself. And so having that reduction here can be a very dramatic improvement. And I think another key aspect here is that basically this supports basically all the targets that are there from the CDC perspective. And there's initial involvement of your Z team to get it installed and up and running, configured initially, but thereafter, the maintenance aspect does not require that Z resource. The maintenance of it is done pretty much I don't want to use the word automagically, but basically brings the updates in automatically, through the through an SSH process itself. So a lot of benefits here, a lot of cost savings available here from the standpoint of ZOS CPU. And also another way of, some people want to isolate where some of their processing works, such as for ETL. This is one way of shifting that workload to another place where you can control the cost and tie that to other budgets or how you want to do your chargeback approach.
Excellent. Thank you very much for all those insights. So I think this is one of the, especially given the fact that 80% of our participants today are replicating from Z, I think this is something that would be of interest to all of our audience to be able to explore more fully. Now, I see that we have a question, so I'm going to see, let me see. We use IIDR SQL replication, not on the list. That's true. Thank you, Iqbal. Does the new process still build the unit of work, or does it break it up in any way? So the answer is no, that the unit of work is still, the integrity of the unit of work is still maintained, and the log traffic is not formatted and sent down the pipe until a commit is seen. The benefit is, the big change is that you have more memory exploitation on Linux than you would necessarily have available to you on System Z natively. And the last question is, what IFI classes and trace numbers are needed to be started? And I think I saw that. Give me a second. I'm going to flip the page. So I'm going to go ahead and close that.
My understanding is pretty much the same as what it is for the CDC today. So I don't think there's really any major change there in terms of what trace classes need to be enabled.
Okay, I did see it. It's on the very next screen, so it was a very well-timed question. But the IFI 360 interface is the one that runs on System Z, and the user ID on DB2 for ZOS that invokes the stored procedure needs the authority to execute the IFI 306 calls. So that looks to me like that there's a typo in here, because I don't think it's both 306 and 360. So I'll have to get that fixed and get it out to everybody when I post this on the blog. But that would be my guess. So I apologize. It's either the IFI 306 or the 360. I think we talked about some of the benefits, the deployment. The minimal memory needed on System Z, so no above-the-bar memory is needed at all. The memory allocated to the LUW remote capture is configurable, so you could run this in a virtualized environment if you needed to under VMware or LPARS on Power or those types of things. Okay.
Frank, there's another question here on this. It's basically asking, can we run capture and apply in the same Linux server? And the answer is yes. There's no reason why you could not do that. So if you want to run the capture, running, say, in Linux on Z or on a Linux platform elsewhere, and it's doing apply directly to the system, that is definitely doable. There's no reason why you can't do that.
That's funny. I didn't even think about that configuration, but you're right. You could just load all this on another server, basically the target server. That's a good idea. Thank you. Okay. The second, I'm going to turn over to you, Ed, because I know you've had a boatload of experience at multiple different customers within the last little while. So please take it away.
All right, certainly. All right, so a lot of what we're going to be talking about here is capabilities. The Hadoop target has been there for quite a while. Kafka is probably one of the relatively new players, generally available now for about a year and a half, 2 years, I believe. It's when I first started working with it. We'll go ahead and jump to the next slide, please. So you can sit there and have a long debate about, gee, do I target Hadoop, HDFS, or do I target Kafka? Obviously, Hadoop existed before Kafka did. Both of them are Apache. In general, Hadoop is really designed, and here's some of the key differences, is very relatively static data sets. Whereas when we look at Kafka, Kafka is about streaming, constantly changing data and events, okay? Hadoop, bulk load, append the data, add it. Whereas Kafka is about, okay, we have the ability of inserting new data, but also basically, do a delete of it as well too. So it sort of represents the constantly changing nature of the data itself, but with the full history. Okay, so in a Hadoop environment, you're not going to necessarily get that history unless you're doing full extracts and loads of the data with the current copies in your target Hadoop environment and tagging sort of the time to it so that you can sort of have that history. Whereas Kafka is better in that that inherent history is maintained for you pretty much automatically. Both of them basically have the notion of running on commodity hardware sets. Need to do a little bit more in terms about balancing things in a Hadoop environment, but whereas Kafka is more self-managed storage itself and a bit of a smaller footprint. Now, I think one of the biggest differences, and this is why I believe I see more and more customers starting to look at Kafka as their target, or now using Kafka as their target, is the notion of the data format, especially if that data format has the potential to change. If your data format is pretty much fixed, you're going to always have agreement between what it looks like at the source and at the target. Hadoop is certainly one that can play in that game. But if you're bringing data in from lots of different sources, if you need to bring the data and take it to numerous different targets, where and especially in those scenarios where the format of that data and the scheme of that data evolves over time. This is where Kafka has a very significant benefit in that it basically it's self-described data. So yeah, there's a little bit more overhead in terms of getting that descriptor information in there, but it's reduced through basically having a registry that defines that format and the ability to maintain that history of what that format looks like. So from a flexibility standpoint, you get a little bit more flexibility with Kafka itself. Now, on the flip side, another side of this is I can use Kafka to feed Hadoop. Okay, so there are customers that are using CDC to replicate to Hadoop directly, but others are also looking at feeding to Kafka and then from Kafka into Hadoop. Okay, so Hadoop to Hadoop or to Kafka. But in general, I think that the biggest trend right now is probably more towards a Kafka streaming environment. And for those that do need to feed a Hadoop, they'll go that route. Now, Kafka can also target numerous other targets environments as well too. So if we jump sort of to the next slide, please.
So I'm going to pause here for a second because we've had two questions that came up. One that I'll let you take, and the other is I have no idea. So the one that I'm going to pass along to you, it says, if the target is Kafka, can the source be DB2 LUW rather than DB2 for ZOS?
Okay, excellent question. So in essence, a Kafka target can be supported by any of the CDC capture agents. So that includes DB2 for ZOS. I have worked with it also in vSAM. So using the classic capture is able to feed this. DB2 LUW, Oracle, SQL Server. So in essence, wherever we have a CDC capture engine and wherever we roll out new CDC capture engines, we'll be able to target Kafka.
Great, thank you. Now, the one that I can't answer, it says, can replication be a solution to move data from database on big endian OS like AIX to a database on small endian OS like Linux? And I got a whiff on that one. Do you know, Ed?
I'm going to say my gut feel is that this is really just talking about, if I'm not mistaken, the notion of code pages. How is that data represented from a code page perspective? And code page translation has always been an aspect of replication over the decades that I've been working with it. I hate to say it, but it's been pretty close to 3 decades. And so the notion of code page translation is really inherent in the earlier editions of replication capabilities, and it's there today.
Good.
So I mean, we can certainly dig a little bit deeper, more specifically in what they're talking about here. But in general, I don't see why not.
Okay, and I'm sort of agreeing, but I just don't I don't have enough confidence in my answer to say yes. So we will look that up. Do have another question, and then we're going to keep rolling just in the interest of time, and that is, does the remote capture leverage zip? And I got to tell you, Scott, that was exactly the first question that I asked on behalf of my customer, and I had the answer before the day was out, and the answer is no. Because the stored procedure is being executed, it is not zip eligible, and so you don't get the zip offload. And I believe that there was some discussion in terms of engineering in order to try to make the routine that runs on System Z to scan the log to make that zip eligible, and for whatever reason that didn't shake out. But great question. So go ahead, Ed. You're still on a roll.
All righty, thank you.
Sure.
All right. So one thing to point out. So in general, when we're targeting Kafka, when we're targeting Hadoop, we're talking unidirectional replication. Basically from an existing CDC capture agent to pick your deployment of Hadoop or Kafka itself. So number of various aspects here being supported, Kerberos authentication, the ability to buffer up the information in memory before doing the append, really trying to, make it as efficient as possible, but also making it configurable, because the amount of data that you're sending through, how much you want to build up before you actually send that through to the target is really up to you. So from the standpoint of what it takes to configure, very simple through the management console interface, fully supported there. So really nothing really special here about it outside of, you can really control mostly on the target apply side, how it behaves with that target agent. The tuning from the source capture side, again, depends upon which source capture agent you're working with. So all the configuration options that are available for tuning and adjusting on the source side are there. Your memory allocation, your disk allocation, all that basically remains unchanged. So if you're currently using any of the CDC capture agents today, the addition of a Hadoop target environment is certainly very, very simple. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and jump to the next slide, unless there's a question here on the Hadoop targeting.
Why don't you go ahead and finish this topic, and then we'll see if we have any more questions before we move on to the next feature.
All right, sounds like a plan. So, targeting Kafka. There are basically two write methods. You can use a REST API or the native Java API. What's really nice is that there are basically connectors available within it that really target any number of different targets. So these targets could basically be a process that you have that says, oh, I recognize the fact that so-and-so just opened an account. I need to trigger off this other downstream process. So it could be business process oriented. But I've also been working with a large number of customers where really what they're doing is they're using Kafka as a landing zone to take the data to somewhere else. So I've worked with a couple customers that are basically using MongoDB as a target for their environment as sort of the next step. I'm trying to think who else have I used. I've got another one that's also considering targeting MemSQL. So, basically, as long as there's a connector available with it to that target from your Kafka distribution or what's provided, and in many cases, you can build those yourself, or there are samples that you can use, but those basically enable you to target yet another data store. And once you bring the data into the topic within Kafka itself, and basically think of a topic as being the equivalent of the source object, the source table. So we replicate from table to table, typically speaking. Think of this as replication from a table to a topic. From that topic, we can take the data out to many different targets that we want, or just a single one, have a process that goes and cleans it up. One of the things that I've seen as being very useful with the, when we're replicating the data into Kafka itself is, especially if you're taking the data to another target database, is the use of the Kafka custom operator process, a KCOP, which basically helps provide a transactionally consistent target environment. You don't have to use it, but it basically provides for the serialization so that if you're streaming and processing that data out of the topic on an ongoing continuous basis, using the serializer is probably highly recommended so that you maintain the proper transactional integrity through to the target itself. So another aspect that I think that has been very useful as well too is the use of a schema registry service. So this is really kind of the aspect that helps us, as your schema changes, what do I have to do in terms of replication, to get that reflected through. So if I make a change in my source environment here, I basically go through, do an update through the administration tooling, and so basically the next changes that come through that pick up that new schema itself, it re-registers in the registry and Kafka itself. So this really makes life a lot easier from the standpoint of schema evolution from your source environments as well too. Let's go to the next slide here. So I think a very interesting use case here in terms of what we're seeing. So what I've seen here is a lot, definitely a lot of interest in using it as a landing zone, kind of a data hub, and others using it as a staging area for the data lake itself, which then is being used to feed their analytic environments itself too. I'm also working with a customer that is basically building basically a couple customers I've worked with where really instead of trying to, when you think about data lake, you think, okay, the data swamp. Am I really trying to handle everything? Am I really trying to bring all my data into this environment? And really those customers that are really progressing forward is where they sort of look at, where do they need this consolidated data view within their environments? Where can it provide business value? Because that's what's really going to drive these types of projects. And one of the most common factors I've seen in a number of engagements I'm working with is customer information. How can I make information about my customers available across the business from all of my lines of business? So a number of these are companies that have acquisition after acquisition, or they have numerous product lines with different data stores and data silos for those different environments, and being able to bring it into an environment that is consistent. So that landing zone of being a consistent representation of that data itself. I have not worked with anyone that's looking at staging for the cloud, but as you take a look at kind of a lot of the enhancements that are coming when we get to the topic in terms of future topics here, a lot here in terms of enabling for cloud, various cloud targets as well too. So I expect these areas here to definitely be growing, as well as delivering OLTP data directly to the cloud to help facilitate analytic needs as well too. And let's move on to the next one, and then we'll open up for questions. So this was, and I kind of made reference to this, the key needs of this customer here, basically an auto parts distributor and repair facility. And so in this case here, they were looking at getting the data into a Hadoop data lake itself. But what they did was they landed the data in Kafka before moving the data into their target Hadoop environment itself. And one of the reasons why they chose the use of Kafka as that intermediate landing zone was the notion that they were bringing data in from a number of different sources. So they were bringing data in from Oracle, DB2 on iSeries, from DB2 LUW environments, and trying to bring this data in, have that consistent environment and consistent notion of a schema. So by doing this, they're able to have that data fully represented, which made it easier to have a very consistent format of the data that they then forwarded on into their Hadoop environment. Okay, so let's stop here and see if there are any questions.
I just popped the questions up, and there aren't any more related, so I'm going to go in the interest of time. We are about to breach our 45-minute boundary, but I guaranteed everybody that we're going to get you out by the top of the hour, and we have a few more things to cover. So thank you very much, Ed. That was very comprehensive, and I think it gave everybody a good idea of the different use cases and the different ways you can deploy that solution. And I know that IBM and a lot of IBM customers are really interested in this. So replication from any supported source to feed the IBM integrated analytics system. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I don't know how many people have deployed the IIAS, but basically the IIAS and DB2 Warehouse are the same data repository under the covers. It's DB2 with Blue Acceleration, with the columnar database, with what used to be known as the data partitioning feature. So if you have a requirement for that sort of analytic engine, Blue Acceleration, and the DPF, the shared nothing, or in the case of the appliance, the shared everything, memory, disk, and processing capability, then replication from any supported source directly into that target will work today. And so there are a few features here that I want to call out, but again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because it's just another target. It's just another database. So all supported CDC sources can go into either the IIAS or the DB2 warehouse directly on one hop. The CDC Fast Apply has a new Mirror Bulk Apply, an MBA, not a Master's in Business Administration, option that supports what are called DB2 external tables. And that was a feature that was lifted from the Netezza PDA box as the apply mechanism for fast ingest. So highly scalable, transaction level speeds, enterprise speeds to be able to get that. Want to move beyond this. The takeaways are, if you're considering DB2 Warehouse and the IIAS and you need to populate them, consider the CDC native apply for those two targets, which are really one and the same. Okay, and they've done some benchmarking in the lab for this. The Mirror Bulk Apply, the MBA, 60K plus ops per second seen in the IBM test environments, much better throughput compared to other apply methods in the test scenario. So something that will scale a lot better. Similar results seen with remote and local CDC applies and the external tables. Okay. Postgres is one of the fastest growing databases in the market today. I'm working with a number of customers who are exploring Postgres right now. This was originally supposed to have been available fourth quarter of 2018. That got pushed back, but it is now available in the first quarter of 2019, and there is an early support program available right now. So if Postgres is on your shopping list, Postgres as a source for replicating data, then please consider this. Contact my colleague Kim May, whose contact information will be later in the presentation, and we can get you connected. So the Postgres capture engine obviously adds to the IIDR offerings. The Postgres is the #1 growth database in the market today, as I mentioned earlier. So you can share that Postgres data into new environments for analytics and integration, and it is delivered via continuous delivery, that is a fixed pack, into IIDR version 11.4. That's a mouthful. So if you have sufficient processor value unit entitlements, you can begin using this immediately. So not a stretch to get started right away when it does become available. And then finally, our last new feature, when we originally put this together and we advertised it, we were going to have 4 and 45, but it's actually 5 and 45. Kim asked me to combine 2 of them together so it would still be 4, and I said we compromised on 4+. So the continuous availability, the IIAS or the DB2 warehouse are the sources and targets for continuous availability. So high availability for my analytics engines. Once customers start depending on these engines for near real-time queries of databases and up-to-the-minute pricing algorithms and point-of-sale algorithms and those types of things, you can't afford to take an outage or have a single point of failure. So the idea is that you're going to be using the replication for continuous availability today, if you have the IIAS appliance, soon the DB2 warehouse and the DB2 warehouse to the IIAS. So basically the DB2 warehouse is the software-only version of what you get in the appliance for the IIAS. The interesting thing to me about the way that this has been implemented is the fact that it is actually QRep under the covers. Now, I noticed that we had a lot of QRep customers on the call, a lot of people who've deployed that today. QRep is very, very fast, so it makes sense from an engineering standpoint. But what IBM is doing, and this is the secret sauce of this implementation, is that a lot of the complexity of building and managing the queues and the queue managers and those types of things are hidden behind the instrumentation that comes with, for example, the IIAS. And so we're going to see an example of that coming up. So you're going to have a near real-time mirror of your primary platform data on the secondary, so you can switch from one to the other for high availability or disaster recovery. And it is an active-active solution. Both the primary and the secondary are active at the same time, so if you wanted to, you could use it for load balancing. So here's an example of the user interface integrated into the IIAS console, so you can see the replication latency and the replication throughput. So the idea is that you don't need to become a QRep expert. One of the challenges that I've always faced with QRep is that databases and database captures were usually managed by the database group, and messaging was managed by another group, whether it was the sysadmins or the server group or somebody like that. So this is all in one bucket, all integrated together with a lot of the complexity under the covers. So a good solution if you're going to go in that direction so that you don't have a single point of failure for your analytics. So now that we have given you all of the 4+ features that are available in fourth quarter or in first quarter this year, I'm going to give you our last poll of the day, and that is, of what you heard today, what sounds the most appealing? What is the stuff that you would like to have on your shopping list here in the near future? And seeing strong interest in remote capture, that's taken about 50%. And the others targeting big data, Kafka and Hadoop, has about a third. And we're seeing sourcing Postgres and DB2 for continuous availability. Seeing some IIAS and DB2 warehouse. So again, all over the map, but the really strong contenders are the remote capture and the big data. So thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm going to go ahead and close this poll, and we're going to start wrapping things up because I promised I'd get you out by the top of the hour. So some strategic plans and initiatives. Again, an eye chart, and I'm not going to take time to go through each one of these bullets, but GDPR, Q replication, we're looking at usability. Things like commit by row count and the oldest commit time, monitoring and resiliency. What we're seeing in IBM products now is some smarter outcomes, that they're starting to build artificial intelligence. So instead of IBM giving you a message and saying, hey, there's something wrong, go fix it, if it's possible within the scope of the product to be able to repair the problem itself. And so self-healing, what IBM used to refer to as autonomic. Improved handling of multi-row inserts, lob data, etc. IMS and VSAM, resiliency, usability, and currency. Then we have some new models, replication add-on for IBM Cloud Private for data. I don't know if anyone out there is using it, that particular product, one of IBM's cloud delivery models. And CDC. Improved resiliency for Kafka. We have the ones in bold that you can see, the remote DB2 capture, Postgres, which is about to be delivered. A source engine that will be new for MySQL. So this may go back to the question that we got to ask earlier. The source, both little and big endian remotely from Linux. So apparently that's not available today, but it will be. And MongoDB is a target, which I think Ed had mentioned earlier. So this is where IBM is headed. I have to add a disclaimer that there is no guarantee when or if these will be delivered. These are in plan now for IBM development. IBM is moving to a new model, both for the roadmap of its product development. They are exposing that to the community using a platform called AHA, and both the roadmap and the ability to promote what used to be called requests for enhancements, RFEs, can be done through AHA. So click on the link. Again, the presentation handout is available on the handout link. 2019 and beyond, more sources, more targets, and enhanced deployment capabilities to make it easier to use QRep and CDC. Improved usability with QRep at the top of the list, CDC number 2, and the classics, DB2 for ZOS, VSAM, and IMS number 3. The automated and learned resilience, more long-term, but that's what I was talking about before in terms of self-healing and not just telling you that there's a problem, but actually going out and fixing it. And integrated security, such as multi-factor authentication. So with that, I'm going to take one more check on questions, and then we are going to wrap up. Do I have any documentation about IIAS setup and configuration from Lisa? And does IBM support IIAS environment with existing hardware? So the answer to that question, IIAS is a package. It comes on its own hardware. IBM has had a long history of appliances. They started with something called the Balanced Configuration Unit, the BCU, which one IBM executive called the PMR factory. So the answer to that one is no. And then the second one is, do you have any documentation about IIAS setup and configuration? And let me go ahead and take that offline. If you're really interested in the IIAS, we'll give you a hand with that, Lisa, after the presentation. Okay, so I don't know that we need to do a summary. We're running out of time. Basically, I think you get the messaging of what it is that we're trying to accomplish here. Delivery of only the changes you need, not the entire source. We don't want to copy the whole DB2 for ZOS database every night. We only want what the deltas are, which is why we use log-based capture. We want it to be non-intrusive to applications and databases. We don't want to take up database agents. We want to look at the log. We don't want to add overhead into buffer pools or any other database structures that are used by transactions. And enterprise ready and enterprise scale. The idea is that we need to do this at the scale that businesses are operating and the speed at which businesses are operating today, so I can perform analytics on the data as it occurs within my transaction processing systems. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to my colleague, Kim May.
And we just have one quick slide on the IBM Oracle attack. This is a special offer that IBM has had running for several years, but it also covers Oracle Golden Gate. So if there are any Golden Gate users out there that are considering possibly moving away from Oracle Golden Gate and considering a move to CDC, IBM has an extremely aggressive pricing offer available. If you're interested in taking a look at something like this, I want to make sure you understand the caveat that it's not like you turn Golden Gate off today and you can turn CDC on tomorrow. There's also a services component that you have to factor into this wonderful deal, but it's still an amazing deal.
Okay, and Ed, I have a shout out to you. Ed is going to be presenting on established bank modernizes legacy data with the data lake and creates new business opportunities. Here are the specifics about that in the presentation. If you're planning on attending the Think conference IBM is holding in San Francisco next week, this is where it's located. This is the abstract, and there is the link to that particular session.
And why don't we share with Ed the list of all the people that are on this webinar so that if any of them are at Think and they don't show up at his session, he can call them.
He can call them personally and say, where the heck are you? I'm presenting right now. Please hurry over to Moscone South Level 2. Okay. So
Appreciate that.
We're gonna wrap this up. Number one, we'd like to help you with this. If some of these technologies interest you and you need a hand, the Fillmore Group provides replication, professional services and training, architecture and implementation, health checks, version upgrades, which I'd like to remind everybody, version 10.2.1 of IDR is out of service now, and 11.3 is going to be out of service by September of this year. So start planning now. We also have authorized training in both change data capture and queue replication. And the source for information on all of this is my colleague Kim May, whose coordinates are here on the screen.
One other thing too. One other thing that we didn't include a lot of information on pricing because obviously Ed and Frank are more interested in the actual implementations and keeping these products running. But remote capture, since I think over half the people on this webinar are interested in remote capture. Remote capture is sold by the IBM license metric called Resource Value Unit, or RVU. And if you're interested in some information on this, it's really interesting. And when people talk about cost savings and you're dealing with the mainframe, it gets extremely complicated. Don't hesitate to get in touch with me. I have lots of information on it.
Great. Thank you, Kim. So with that, this again is the AHA page for the roadmaps and the RFEs. There are a series of replication resource links. You can be able to click through any of these at your leisure on CDC, QRep, Big Data, DeveloperWorks, the data replication community. There are lots of blog posts and other artifacts out there to give you a hand. And finally, we'd like to thank you all for participating today. There is a very short 3-question survey that is at the end of the presentation when you log out today. So if you take a moment and answer those 3 questions, and Kim, we're going to give you the last word.
Please do the survey. The reason I'm asking everyone to do the survey is I think these guys did a great job today, but this is also your opportunity to give us your feedback on how we did, and we thank you very much for your time today.
Take care, everyone. Thank you very much, Ed. You did a great job.
Thank you. You too, Frank. Thank you, Kim. Everyone have a great day.
You too.